Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you all. As always, I just want to remind you, um, please feel free to make yourselves comfortable, whatever that means to you. Make yourselves at home. If you're at home, make yourself at home. If you're somewhere else, I hope you can feel safe and feel like you can be at home. And if that means you need to turn your screen off and have a little more privacy, if you need to lie down, if you need to stand up or walk around, whatever it is, it's okay with me. And, whatever feels good. So today I'd like to pick up our discussion and practice centered around what the Buddha called the five hindrances. So a couple months ago, we talked about desire or wanting. And today we're going to talk about hatred or aversion. And in the email, I used the word desire because I don't know, it's a little bit more exciting. And in this email, I used the word hatred because it, gets your attention a little bit. But there's a lot of different translations. So I want to talk about some of the different translations and some of the potential meanings of what this experience is. So the Pali word for aversion is patiga, which literally it means striking against. So that's one aspect. It's like this quality inside of us that is striking out or striking against. And another word that is sometimes used here for aversion or dislike is um, vyapada, which also kind of translates as aversion or dislike or ill will. And there's another word that is sometimes used, which is dosa, which translates more directly as hatred. So in a lot of the Buddhist writings, I found a lot of these words to kind of used interchangeably. And my understanding is that they all kind of fall under this bigger umbrella, this dosa umbrella, or this umbrella that best translates as hatred. So in our culture, we typically reserve this kind of word for really intense or extreme dislike, or um, you know, kind of more of a violent feeling behind that word. Um, and it's interesting to consider it in this context because it suggests that basically all these mental states are rooted in hatred. So whether it's something that maybe would be more benign, like aversion or dislike or ill will is kind of not benign, but um, regardless, they're all aspects of the same root, which is hatred. And it could mean hatred towards ourselves or towards our experience or hatred towards someone else. One of the um, popular and most renowned translators of the Pali texts, Bhikkhu Bodhi, he describes this as resistance or rejection or destruction. And so this can include a wide range of states, all the way from violent rage and hatred to anger or impatience to ill will to animosity or even just annoyance or irritation. And even it extends to the experience of fear or grief or sorrow or sadness. So these kind of all fall under the same umbrella. So that's really interesting. We can kind of explore what that might mean when if fear and grief and sorrow are forms of aversion. Um, but I'll come back to that. So I think it can be helpful to hold all these stays under the same umbrella because um, when we see that the more subtle forms of aversion, like annoyance or irritation or dislike or pushing away, when these aspects have the same root as the bigger, more intense forms like hatred or rage, we can use this as motivation and direction for our practice. So, what does that mean? So when we're sitting in meditation, in the formal meditation, or maybe just mindfulness in our daily life, we can work with the smaller experiences of aversion. And when we're doing that, we're practicing for the bigger, more destructive forms. So it can be motivating to know that when I pay attention to my little annoyances and my little aversion, it's strengthening the muscle that can bear witness to our states of aversion or ill will or hatred without reacting in a way that's harmful to ourselves or others. So that's the goal. And and this is what our practice is for. We get to like have these little bite-sized pieces, and then we can kind of build these qualities within us. Gil Fronsdale, he's a great mindfulness teacher, um, and he talks about the relationship between desire and aversion, or desire and ill will. So we talked about this a couple months ago, how desire and aversion, they're really two sides of the same coin. So Gill says that they're paired in that they are opposite compulsive desires. The first wants something, and the second does not want something. Both are mental forces that obstruct our ability to remain mindful and free. It's hard to be calm and settled when we're in their grip. When strong, they obscure our ability to see clearly and to choose wisely. So they can obscure our ability to see clearly and to choose wisely. And so, how do we work with these? That's the question, always. Like, well, what do we do with this? And in this tradition, and well, the practice that works for me is to notice, is mindfulness. So, step one is just noticing. So, notice when aversion is present or absent. So, it's funny it's not part of my upbringing to notice, when a feeling is absent, but that's something we can do. When it's really there, we can bring mindfulness to it, but also we can notice and appreciate when it's not there. Joseph Goldstein talks about, he says, all the various states of aversion are conditioned reaction to what we find unpleasant. So there's an experience of unpleasant or a thought of unpleasant, and our conditioned reaction is to just resist and to push away, to have aversion to it. And so in our practice, this can show up in a lot of different ways. One of the obvious ways is physical pain or discomfort. So it's pretty fair to say that typically we don't like pain. Most of us naturally try to avoid it. And our conditioned response, and maybe even not a conditioned response, our just natural response, our biological response is to avoid it. And so we avoid, we contract around it. Sometimes we get frustrated or we fear the possibility of having discomfort or pain. And we naturally try to push it away. And if we can't push it away, we'll try to change it or modify it or just put an end to it. We can't prevent it, that is. And it's natural to try to make ourselves more comfortable. And I'm always inviting you to be more comfortable. And I want people to feel comfortable. There's nothing wrong with this. It can be a great act of kindness to help yourself or help someone else experience less pain and suffering. And there's a possibility that we can work with discomfort and pain um, as a part of our practice. And it's an opportunity in our practice. For me, as someone who's experienced a lot of chronic pain and has a history of chronic pain, I've learned to use pain as what we call a Dharma gate. So a Dharma gate means it's an opening, it's an opportunity into the present moment. And what I've learned, what all the teachers say, and I've had little glimpses of this, is it's possible to experience pain or discomfort without resisting and without pushing it away. And when we do that, we can experience pain and not suffer. And so that's kind of the magic. And so when I'm feeling discomfort, and again, meditation is a great opportunity to practice because sometimes, um, I can sit down in a formal way in a meditative posture, and after a while, it just can become uncomfortable, or my back starts talking to me, or my knees are irritated by kneeling, or whatever it is. And we can begin to ask ourselves, well, what if I don't move? What if I don't try to change this and make it go away? And there has to be some kind of sense of safety, like, okay, well, I think I'm safe. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to injure myself. It's just pain, it's just a sensation. So when that is the case, um, and that's a big caveat, obviously, you don't want to hurt yourself or injure yourself. So we can ask, well, what if I don't have to move? Can I just be with this? Can I just be with this? And then we begin to investigate and explore the direct experience with more curiosity. So when we bring curiosity to our direct experience, our minds and our hearts can relax around the pain. And instead of it just being this kind of blank label, pain, bad, make it stop, um, it's actually a lot more nuanced. There's color and there's like tingly sensations, and then there's warmth and there's areas of tightness, and then it changes and um, turns into something else. And it's actually quite interesting. And it's not just this one thing that we call pain and it's bad. It's like this whole complex experience. And the more curiosity I bring, the more um, I shift into this place of equanimity. And even when there's discomfort or something that was originally was having aversion to, I can find this place of a peace of mind and equanimity. So the same is um, true with unpleasant thoughts or emotions. We can practice this with, our thoughts. And so we might have a thought or emotion that's unpleasant or leads to other difficult or painful emotions. So it might be a memory or thinking about something in the past, or having a fantasy or imagination about something that might happen in the future. Maybe it won't, maybe it will. Um, and we start to have this whole dream, and we can get really angry, or get really sad or anxious about something that um, hasn't even happened. Like nothing's happened. I'm just sitting here and nothing has changed. And I'm in this whole world of difficult emotions. And I'm starting to resist not anything in reality, just the possibility of something that might happen. Um, Raise your hand if you've ever done that. Yeah, it's pretty normal. Such a funny thing that we do. Um, and just for the record, it's just part of our biology also. Our brain is wired to do this. And um, it's actually a really important part of our evolution. When our brains had the ability to create these movies about something that might happen in the future, it actually was a big evolutionary advantage. It helped us survive because we can envision possible scenarios, and that helped us stay alive, really. So it's a really important part of being human, is having this virtual reality thing that plays. And, it's also quite often overkill. It's not necessary, and it doesn't always serve us. So when we catch ourselves doing this, it's just another opportunity. We can use this noticing to just come back to the present moment. So rather than being lost in the thought and the aversive experience of trying to push away some kind of reality, um, we can just notice how it is to have aversion arise. So the Buddha talks about practices and conditions that lead to the removal of aversion or hatred. It sounds pretty nice, but the removal of aversion and hatred. And it also sounds kind of like a tall task to me. Um, and the first step is just this basic quality of noticing, mindfulness. So becoming mindful of the fact that I'm experiencing aversion instead of just being in it on autopilot. So we can make a soft mental note. So we can use words like a little soft mental note that says aversion or ill will or whatever word you like or whatever's the tone of it. It could be hatred. Oh, I'm really having this feeling of hatred towards this experience or this person or this politician or whatever. And sometimes that's enough. We can just like have this little mental note. We catch ourselves doing it and we say in the back of our mind, aversion or ill will. And we do it once or twice or sometimes 100 times. Every time it happens, we just interrupt it and we have this soft mental note. And then just like magic, it changes. It's over. And so sometimes that's enough and we're done. And the pattern kind of gets interrupted and we are on to another experience. It just changes so fast. Um, and and then the next step is to become mindful of the conditions that lead to the arising of aversion. So this is kind of like um, a deeper layer of investigation. So we begin to investigate more deeply. And again, Gil Fronsdale, he says sometimes ill will is used to cover something deeper. And the Pali word for hindrance, nivarana, it literally means something that covers over. So these hindrances, they cover over direct experience. And so we can ask ourselves, what is, I'm kind of mixing up his quote and I'm paraphrasing a little bit. So sorry, Gil, I'm butchering what you originally said. But the question is, what is ill will covering? So then he goes on to say it might be frustrated desire or possibly fear or embarrassment. And the cover of ill will is a way of protecting ourselves. It might also be discomfort as we long to, as we fixate on what we don't like, we won't feel how uncomfortable we are. So that's kind of the next level. We can ask ourselves, is this covering up something else? So what is the aversion trying to protect us from? And in some moments that if we feel safe and we can look a little bit deeper to see what the deeper feeling is, that can be really helpful just to bring some awareness to that. And the key, I think, or what's helpful when we're doing this kind of investigation is not being attached to the answer, not being really fixated on like figuring it out with our minds, because then we can create a lot of stories that may or not be true. But the question is helpful. So just asking the question can really be meaningful, and it might bring some kind of clarity, or it might not. But it can just be productive to ask those questions. What's underneath this, or what is this covering up? So sometimes that's not enough, and so um, the thought process or the emotion is just it persists, and the aversion doesn't want to let go, and we're really caught in it, and we're caught in this dislike or hatred or ill will. And then we can maybe begin to even deepen our investigation. So, is there a nuance to this type of aversion? So, instead of just labeling it, okay, aversion or ill will, or kind of putting this big blanket on it, um, well, what's the nuance? Is it like, is there a quality of disappointment or a quality of like fear or loss? Or is it just annoyance? Maybe there's a part of us that's just complaining and annoyed at everything. So then we can kind of bring the label to the more nuanced emotion or thought process, and then it's as if the feeling or the thought needs that accurate label, and then it's like, oh, okay, I feel seen, thank you, and then it can begin to soften a little bit. And if you don't really find the right words in your own mind, then it's like it doesn't feel seen yet. And when we do, it can subside for a while. So Thich Nhat Hanh, he talks about anger, and well, he talks about a lot of things, but in this particular quote about anger, he says, the Buddhist attitude is to take care of anger. We don't suppress it. We don't run away from it. We just breathe and hold our anger in our arms with utmost tenderness. Then the anger is not alone. It's with your mindfulness. I love this idea that whatever the feeling is, it just doesn't want to be alone. The anger doesn't want to be alone. It wants to be in the presence of our mindfulness. And that's such a loving gesture that we can give to ourselves of just being with it, paying attention. So he goes on to say, anger is like a closed flower in the morning. As the sun shines on the flower will bloom because the sunlight penetrated deep into the flower. Mindfulness is like that. If you keep breathing, mindfulness particles will infiltrate the anger. When sunshine penetrates a flower, the flower cannot resist. It is bound to open itself and reveal its heart to the sun. If you keep breathing on your anger, shining your compassion and understanding on it, your anger will soon crack and you will be able to look into its depths and see its roots. So here he's talking about anger, but you can really use that for any difficult feeling or emotion that we're resisting. So we're breathing into it and we're shining light on it and compassion and understanding, and then it'll soon crack. So that's easy to say. And sometimes that doesn't work. And we get caught up, perpetuating and enabling the emotion because we get so into it and we like are trying to investigate it and feel it. And then we can get kind of stuck in this kind of self-indulgent or self-pitying or just this loop. And it's like by paying attention to it, it just perpetuates this loop. So that happens too. And of course, I saw a lot of people nodding and smiling. It's a funny thing. Um, and so in these cases, we can rely on other advice. So there's a different perspective. So um, Sayadaw U Pandita, he said, this is one of my favorites of the day. Pulverize the defilements, show them no mercy. So that's his advice. We want to pulverize the defilements and show them no mercy. So this is like taking the sword of wisdom and just cutting down the unskillful thought patterns. Um, and sometimes we just need to do that. We just need to tell ourselves, stop, enough. And then we can, sometimes that forceful inner voice can actually just interrupt this kind of this loop that we get caught in. Joseph Goldstein recommends using the words enough, or he likes the words dead end. So it's indicating that this just needs to stop. This mental pattern is not going anywhere. It's a dead end. And just stop. And so if you say that to somebody, who's going through their thing, it's usually not that helpful. Sometimes it is, but mostly, it doesn't help. But sometimes in the right moment, we can skillfully say that to ourselves, and it does work actually. And we can just interrupt this loop. Um, so for me, like all these little tricks have worked at different times, in different moments in my practice. And, the real skill is finding out, well, what's going to work for me today? And, do I need to hold my aversion with loving kindness and compassion and tenderness, or do I need to just like have a sword and cut it? And for me, like when I have these repetitive thought processes or um, you know, movies that play in my head or emotional loops, it is like a movie. And if I'm not being mindful of it, it's just I'm in the movie and I'm the main character and everything is revolving around me and is this crazy story. Um, and when I become mindful, it's as if I'm watching the movie. And there's a way where we can become the observer and we're watching this whole thing play out. And when we do that, it's like it gets boring. How long can we watch ourselves do the same thing before we're like, I've seen this movie 1,000 times. I'm going to watch a different movie. And so that's the wisdom like sword, just like ending it. But it only happens if you can observe it enough to get bored of it. And um, yeah, so this is a wisdom sword poem. This is called Smart Cookie. Uh, I think this is Richard Schiffman is his name. I have to look it up. I forgot, but it's called Smart Cookie after Wallace Stevens. The fortune that you seek is in another cookie, was my fortune. So I'll be equally frank. The wisdom that you covet is in another poem. The life that you desire is in a different universe. The cookie that you're craving is in another jar. The jar is buried somewhere in Tennessee. Don't even think of searching for it. If you found that jar, everything would go kerflooey for 1,000 miles around. It is the jar of your fate in an alternate reality. Don't even think of living that life. Don't even think of eating that cookie. Be a smart cookie. Eat what's on your plate, not in some jar in Tennessee. That's my wisdom for today. I know it's not what you were looking for. So that line, eat what's on your plate, that's the sword of wisdom. It's like whatever it is in our experience that's uncomfortable or unpleasant, and that we're pushing away, whether it's grief or sadness or anger, that's what's on our plate. And that's what we have to eat right now. And if we can't eat that and we're wanting some other cookie or some other life, that leads to a lot of suffering. And there's a lot of wisdom also that we can use to determine, well, maybe I don't have to eat this cookie. Maybe I can just get a different plate of food. And so it takes a lot of wisdom to discern, well, what can I actually change about my life or the situation? What can I make an impact on? What do I have agency over? And what do I not? You know? And so that's kind of the old serenity prayer. Give me the wisdom to know the difference. So another approach is to use wise reflection to dissolve the pattern. So the Buddha would ask, what good will it do to hold on to malice or anger or resentment? So asking ourselves this question is sometimes enough. We can just ask the question, what good will it do if I keep hanging on to this? And sometimes the mental notes or labels or mental investigating don't help. And we really just have to feel the embodied sensation in our experience. And so we notice the pain or the tension or the kaleidoscope of sensations, and we just keep following them and we keep staying present with the physical sensations. And so in this practice, we keep coming back to our anchor and we keep coming back to our body. We keep coming back to the breath. And so again, this is like the warrior mentality that U Pandita suggests. We can just interrupt the process and say, no, I'm breathing now. Or no, I'm just gonna pay attention to my body. And we just cut it off. And we can interrupt our own loop mid-sentence. And then there's one other possibility. And the Buddha was very pragmatic. And so when all these other skillful tools don't work, he just said, think about something else. And And I don't know exactly the translation, but that's one of the translations I read. Just think about something else. And this is actually really wise. Sometimes we need a break and we need to distract ourselves and focus on our attention on something else. And this is really a healthy way to pendulate or to titrate difficult experiences. And it can be really helpful and effective to just give ourselves a break, and do something that gives us comfort or peace or some kind of uh, entertainment, even just to just stop because it's not helpful anymore. It gets to a point where we're not going anywhere with it. So this is all how to work with it as aversion arises. But then the goal is to prevent the future arising of aversion. So how do we do this? How do we prevent the future arising of ill will or hatred or aversion? Um, and in this tradition, the answer is compassion and loving kindness. These are the most common antidotes for aversion. So when we cultivate compassion and loving kindness for ourselves or for our experience or for others, ill will naturally falls away. Joseph Goldstein said metta or loving kindness, he called it a dissolver of aversion and the ground for wisdom. So loving kindness is the dissolver of aversion. And so he says the more loving and patient we are with our difficulties and disturbances, the less lost we are in reactivity, and our choices and actions become wiser, which in turn leads to more happiness, more metta, loving kindness, and greater freedom. So this is our goal, obviously. Our choices can become wiser, and we can have more happiness, more loving kindness, and greater freedom. Okay, so with that, um, how about we sit for a moment without words and practice together? So again, I say sit, but you can lie down, you can curl up in a ball, you can stand or do a walking meditation, whatever you like. And the invitation is to make yourselves comfortable. Find a way to be alert and relaxed and reasonably comfortable. You can choose to close your eyes, or you can keep your eyes half open with a soft gaze on the floor in front of you. So I invited you again to be reasonably comfortable. And it's never wise to do anything that's going to lead to an injury or perpetuating a current injury that you have. So that's where the reasonable comfort comes in. And in this practice, if a discomfort arises, how would it be to just be with it instead of instantly shifting or wanting it to go away? And I be with that. So we begin by establishing a anchor. I might choose to focus on my breath. Notice the rising and falling of my chest or abdomen. I might notice the way the breath moves down the back of my throat or in through my nostrils. And whatever happens, I can come back to this breath. I might choose to pay attention to my body or my physical sensations. I might notice the touch points where my body is touching the cushion or the ground or my chair or my clothing or my hands. How my hands are touching each other. Or I might notice there's areas of tension or pain. And if there's discomfort or pain, can I notice if there's aversion to it, even if it's subtle? Can I notice that and be with that? Or the absence of aversion. What is it like when I am totally absent of diversion, of aversion, excuse me, and there's no aversion present in my experience? I might notice sounds. Maybe there's sounds in my environment. Maybe the sound of my voice. What is it like to experience sound? A sound is just a sound, and yet sometimes we have an aversion to sounds. Sometimes it bothers us or annoys us. And I notice what that's like if I'm feeling an aversion to a sound. Sometimes the aversion that we experience is really big. Maybe there's ill will or even hatred. Sometimes it's just dislike. So, what's the flavor right now? Sometimes there are little micro aversions, little popcorns that pop up. Oh, that's uncomfortable. Oh, that's annoying. And sometimes it's the big pervasive story. When I bring my attention there, what is the tone of this experience right now? And in this moment, in this practice, when I notice my aversion, what works for me today or with this moment? I want to just come back to my anchor, come back to my body or my breath. Does it help to bring a sense of compassion to my experience, loving kindness to myself or someone else? Does it help to just say, enough, enough, I'm tired of this movie, done with this particular story, let's move on. and again, I come back to this anchor, this breath, or this body, this sound experience. When you're ready, I invite you to begin to bring some movement into your fingers and toes. You might open your eyes if you wish and come back into your room. And you can, when you're ready, come back into our Zoom room. How was that for you? Any reflections or comments, questions?